Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here today to learn with us and go deeper about evidence-based early literacy practices from within the Mass Literacy Guide. My name is Donna Goldstein, and I'm an ELA Literacy Content Lead at DESE. Mass Literacy Getting Started is a series of 6 sessions designed to support users in accessing specific areas of the guide. Each session will feature experienced educators speaking to their use of evidence-based practices and connecting this work to the guide. Today's focus area is foundational skills instruction, which is addressed in 2 key areas of the guide. Subsequent sessions will focus on other areas, including engaging with complex text, fluent word reading, language comprehension, students experiencing reading difficulties, and leading a multi-tiered system of support. A link to a central doc with registration for the upcoming sessions and all of the resources that are being shown today is being dropped into the chat for you right now. As you know, and as you heard, this session is being recorded. A video of the session will be posted to the Mass Literacy site under the top resources section within about a week or so. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature. We will be monitoring this, and while we might not get to all questions, we will try to respond to as many as possible. We really appreciate your being here today. Like I mentioned a moment ago, a page with all of the links shared during today's session, including the top resources section where the video will be posted, was just dropped into the chat. So all of the resources that are being shared today are easily accessible to you. Our time for today's session will include a brief introduction and an overview of today's focus areas, while most of the time will be for our featured speaker, Lisa Hannafin. After Lisa presents, we'll have some time for question and answer, and that will be moderated by my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid. For those of you who are new to the guide, Mass Literacy is a statewide effort to empower educators with evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. Evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms that are culturally responsive and sustaining will put our youngest students on a path toward literacy for life. As part of Mass Literacy, over the next several years, DESE will offer early literacy programming paired with implementation supports, including resources, professional development, and grants. You're looking at a screenshot of the Mass Literacy landing page. We have a great video here featuring classroom teachers, specialists, and a couple of the researchers who advised us on the guide. Many voices, perspectives, and areas of expertise contributed to this work. The featured speakers in this particular video were among the 100 plus stakeholders who advised. We engaged with research advisors actually from across the country and even internationally. We also had advice from Massachusetts preschool and elementary educators, administrators, education preparation faculty too. DESE additionally partnered with the Mass Reading Association, which you can see their logo is right down in the corner of the landing page to show their partnership. And we also collaborated with the Mass Association of School Administrators, working with a group of assistant superintendents. The guide is made up of 5 primary sections, if you will: components of the core literacy block, skills for early reading, students experiencing reading difficulties, leading a multi-tiered system of support, and pathway to equity in early literacy. As mentioned during the welcome, today's session focuses on the foundational skills section, and that connects directly to the components of the core literacy block, as well as skills for early reading. Our featured speaker, Lisa Hannafin, a grade 1 classroom teacher from Malden, will be sharing her experience using evidence-based foundational skills instruction in just a few minutes. Let's take a look at each of the 2 areas that support foundational skills instruction. And we'll start right over here first with skills for early reading. The intent of this section is to identify the skills that contribute to early reading proficiency. Many of you may be familiar with the simple view of reading, which is a cognitively based theory. Essentially, the theory asserts that in order to learn to read, or as children learn to read, they must develop both fluent word reading as well as language comprehension. These two factors combined or multiplied, fluent word reading and language comprehension, account for the variance in reading ability in young children. And this here is held up in lots and lots of studies. Some of the foundational skills components that Lisa will be speaking to today are supported in the guide right here in the Skills for Early Reading section under Fluent Word Reading. Also, we have components of the core literacy block. The intent of this section is to identify the components that should be included in literacy instruction pre-K to 3. And as you can see from the colored segments, that we have three main components: foundational skills, engaging with complex text, and writing. Oral language is a major component, and it's embedded throughout the literacy block, as demonstrated down here in the chevron stripe underlying all three of those areas. This entire section is geared toward teachers and administrators, just like many of you who are with us today, who are looking for information and resources related to the core literacy block. Today, our focused work within the guide, however, will be here at the foundational skills section. So now that you have a sense of where we're going today, let's get ready to meet our featured speaker. We're so pleased to have Lisa Hanna about her evidence-based practice in foundational skills today. Lisa has been an educator for 16 years and is currently a grade 1 classroom teacher at Malden Public Schools. She has also taught integrated preschool and kindergarten at the Early Literacy Center in Malden. Lisa has served as a literacy champion, one of about 50 educators, primarily teachers with some administrators from across the Commonwealth that were deeply involved in advising DESE about the guide. And I had kind of mentioned about some of those opportunities earlier. Lisa has also been a Teach Plus Commonwealth Policy Fellow and an ELA K2 panelist on the Massachusetts Curate Fellowship. She has lots of exciting insights to share with us today, and we're very grateful to her for her time. So Lisa, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite you to share yours. We're really happy you could be here today.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm excited to show and share with you some of the ways I have been using the Mass Literacy Guide to implement evidence-based practices in my first grade classroom. And I am going to share my screen. Let me pull up. All right. So I thought that I would begin today by sharing a bit of my journey as an educator and some of the experiences that have impacted me and helped me help shape my practice in the classroom. So as Donna had mentioned, I was a Teach Plus fellow. And through that fellowship, I really learned about the policy side of education. Next, as a curate fellow through DESE, I really learned about the curriculum piece. And I had the rare opportunity of unpacking the different ELA curricula that we had happened to look at during that time. And I was able to do a really deep dive and get to examine each component. I highly recommend, if the curate program ever comes up for you all, it was such a great experience. Then the incredible reporting of Emily Hanford and her podcasts on reading instruction really exposed the inequalities, and for me, really humanized the issue, especially the data that we usually always talk about, but it really just put a face and stories to the issues. So that had a profound effect on me in my practice. Then The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler, that resonated with me personally as an educator because it followed classroom teachers. It was just super relatable. And it was more sort of talked about the instructional piece And then Crafting Minds with Dr. Melissa Orkin and Leandra Elion taught me so much about reading disabilities, the reading brain, David Kilpatrick, and the significance of phonological awareness, which is why I also had included this quote here, that early training of phonological awareness in kindergarten and first grade prevents many reading difficulties from happening. And that was quoted from by David Kilpatrick. And then last, but certainly not least, I was honored to have had the opportunity to collaborate with other literacy champions from across Massachusetts on working toward the collective goal of empowering educators with evidence-based practices in literacy that all students need. And I would add deserve, which is the Mass Literacy Guide. So let's get started. This is the landing page of the Mass Literacy Guide. It is an extremely comprehensive site with a wealth of valuable information. Although my focus today is on the foundational skills, as we navigate together, I may just briefly point out a few links for a few other key topics that I have found useful. For example, I believe there's just one piece about differentiated instruction and then assessment that you'll see throughout the presentation. So we are going to start with exploring the Skills for Early Literacy tab first. And then once finished, we will return back to this main page to visit the components of the Core Literacy Block tab. So reading is the act of processing meaning. We know that readers must develop both word recognition skills and language comprehension skills to become a skilled reader. For those of you familiar with Scarborough's rope, the visual here is representative of that. The area we are looking at today, the foundational skills, are found at the bottom portion of the rope or here under word recognition on the left. When you select any of the tabs on this page, you will get detailed information on each of the components. So we will begin with phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is the awareness of and the ability to work with speech sounds in spoken language. I can tell you, I was not aware of the significant role phonological awareness plays in learning to read. And I was also unaware that problems with phonological awareness have been identified as a major cause of reading difficulties. I always thought phonological awareness was just rhyming, not realizing there was actually a continuum that, although it does include rhyming, it includes most and probably more importantly, phonemic awareness and the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. This knowledge would prove to be a game changer for not only for me, but also for my students. And I will talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. The link I referenced here is from the University of Florida Literacy Institute. And I found this to be very helpful. It's a list of activities that you can use in the classroom to help develop the phonological awareness skills. And notice here, this is the document under that link. The activities progress from the simplest or largest spoken units of language, the word level, to the most difficult or the smallest spoken units of language, which is the phoneme level. I found this layout providing activities very helpful, especially around planning that targeted instruction for wherever the kids, my kids fall on that continuum. Many of these lessons, as well as others, are actually now available on the University of Florida Literacy Institute virtual hub site. And that has a wealth of activities and resources, especially for those of you that may be teaching remotely.
Lisa, before you continue on, you're sharing such interesting information. Would it be possible at all for you to enlarge your screen a little bit? Is that possible?
I don't think I can.
Okay, well,
Lisa,
I do.
if you can't, don't worry about it. Just a reminder that all of the resources that she's sharing are in the handout that we dropped into the chat. So you also have them there, the resources.
Yeah, and these are sort of like print screens in my slides. So I think it's just, I don't think I can make it any larger. I'm sorry. Let's see. Next is the phonics and decoding information. Phonemes are represented by letters or groups of letters, graphemes. If a child learns to decode the symbol to sound relationship, then that child will be able to translate printed words into spoken language, thereby accessing information about meaning. As one who likes visuals, I particularly found these two structured literacy lessons that I have pointed out here. One is actually a module from Hill for Literacy, and the other is a structured literacy lesson that really shows the lesson from beginning to end, and that is from Literacy How. And I've actually used some of the activities that are in this video in my own practice. I also pointed out an example of the scope and sequence, and I will revisit that later as well. And I just love this quote from Dr. Nadine Gab and how it relates to reading and the need for that explicit systematic instruction. She says, you can listen to Mozart or Beethoven for many, many years, but if you are sitting in front of the piano, it doesn't mean that you can play the piano. You need explicit instruction to practice and develop this skill. It's something that happens over a prolonged period of time. It's not something that happens overnight. And it's for sure not something that happens naturally. Much as we know, like reading, that, you surround children with books, they're not going to just organically begin to read. They really require that explicit instruction. Two more highlights I noted. An example of a phoneme graphing mapping lesson. Again, like I said, I really like videos that sort of show me and don't just tell me how to do something, as well as the 6 syllable types from Reading Rockets. Reading Rockets is also another a great resource, and there's a lot of resources from Reading Rockets within this guide as well. I especially liked this chart provided for the 6 syllable types because it includes examples of each type. And I am someone that, especially I teach first grade, so I may not always be getting to all 6 types, but once in a while, I do have sort of those high flyers where I may be working with, I may need to teach more higher level skills. And for me, it's super helpful to go back and kind of give myself a refresher to make sure that I'm doing things correctly. So that's a really nice resource. So this is the automatic word recognition page. I've highlighted Aries phases, which are the stages of reading on this particular page. This is also something that I found helpful when thinking about my own students and sort of where they fall in regard to their reading development. This is a really nice description of each phase, and then it also has some really great characteristics of the phases. And so that was just something that I felt was important to point out. It was really helpful. Now, so we have returned back to the main page of the Mass Literacy Guide, the landing page. And now we will take a look at the components of the core literacy block tab. This I really, really love because the information is sorted by grade level. And as Donna had mentioned in the beginning, it is it does contain sort of those components. This is the one component, one of the components of the core literacy block. But having it by grade level for me, I can tell you, I have jumped back into kindergarten, and I've also checked out the second grade. So there are resources, for both. Like they've all three of those grade levels have been helpful for me as a first grade teacher. So I highlighted some things for this presentation. I focused on the grade 1 document, and it's super comprehensive. It's about 12 pages long. So let's see, I'll show you what I pointed out. So pages 1 and 2, these were just some really quick, those other topics I had mentioned. There's some really great information about differentiated instruction, also assessment, and some the WIDA information for English learners is found on this page. Pages 3 and 4, the phonological awareness, the typical sequence chart was super helpful for me. Again, because it includes examples of each of the stages. Also, this is I sort of pulled out one of the videos for you to see. This is a video from the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Program. These are linked in the guide, and it shows the movements, hand movements. And I can say that implementing Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Program in my practice was a game changer. It's really super multisensory. It's efficient, it's engaging, and it's effective. It was an area of my practice that, like I had told you and mentioned in the beginning, that I really didn't realize how important phonemic awareness was. I hadn't given it that much time during the day or in my lessons, and just simply because I didn't know any better. Now I do Heggerty. It's about a 10-minute lesson a day. And it's one of my kids' favorite times of the day. Let's see. Oh, and then also along with that, because I'm really trying to be super intentional with sort of like mouth movement and pronunciation when I am teaching phonemes, the correct pronunciation phoneme video that I linked here, the 44 phonemes video from the Rollins Center, was extremely helpful for me to, again, a visual, but to see. Also I have been showing my kids, they sometimes will actually watch, they like watching the video too. And I've implemented this year a sound wall that replaced my word wall. And so again, focusing on the mouth and the tongue and the lips and is really important for the kids. And so this, I just put up, this is just a picture. Now I just returned after being remote since March. We just returned to hybrid the week before vacation. So my wall is not done, but this is just like it's start of it. I took pictures of my kids' mouths. And so I'm hoping to, sort of add those to my wall. But having a sound wall has been really helpful. I've been doing one virtually with the kids all year long. So page 5 and 6 now are provide more videos showing phonics and decoding lessons. These ones are from Reading Rockets. I pointed out links also to decodable text resources, including a webinar that was fantastic from the 95% group. And then also notice too, the letters sample, scope, and sequence. That is from Louisa Moats and Carol Tolman. I will get to that in just a minute. But that's also linked here. It was also linked in the previous tab that I had gone through. But I will get to that in a second. And then I just, highlighted here about the importance of phonics instruction being systematic and explicit, and should include decoding and encoding. Let's see. On page 7, I highlighted information from Reading Rockets and Really Great Reading on teaching high frequency words. Many sight words can actually be sounded out, and or they have similar phonics patterns. For example, like he, be, and me. So for words that do have irregular spellings, they actually can be coded until the kids learn them by heart. And so that's something called heart word magic. And that is Reading Rockets has has some great information about teaching high frequency words. And then Really Great Reading is actually listed in there. It's Really Great Reading is actually a link that's within the information from Reading Rockets as well about teaching sight words. And I teach my high frequency words this way, and the kids really do love it. So here is page 1 of the letter scope and sequence for word study, reading, and spelling. And here's how I used it. So I went through and, first it's just important to note that there isn't one accepted scope and sequence in the field. We do know that instruction should be explicit and systematic. I went through and used this and sort of highlighted all the K and 1 skills. I really liked the scope and sequence because it included the grade levels for both reading and spelling. And notice how just because you teach, a certain phonics skill for reading doesn't necessarily mean developmentally that a child will be able to spell that using that particular this particular skill that you this particular skill that you teach. So I thought that was interesting, and I really like this chart a lot. The syllable types again was helpful when I was planning, and I went through and like I said, I highlighted them all, and then I compared it. So I'm going to show you. I'll show you what I did. So here is a scope and sequence that I compared it to. And I like to say now that sort of the more I educate myself, and I'm by no means an expert at all, I'm learning. But as I learn, I really like to think of myself as having a literacy lens, is what I call it. And I feel like I begin to notice things sort of in practice and, in different resources, both goody and bad. So I'm sort of like, I feel as though with our readers, right? Once they begin breaking the code, they begin to notice things, and they'll tell you in like their loud and proud voices, hey, Mrs. Hannafin, I see the E twins or something like that. So anyway, with this scope and sequence as a guide, I made some adjustments with using the letters scope and sequence. So notice like this scope and sequence had a 6-week review. And so I'm thinking, well, knowing that kids are at different places, I feel like pacing is really important. So although I don't want to go too fast for kids, I also want to make sure that I'm not holding other kids back. And so I feel like there are some kids and even some skills that may need more time than what is actually listed in the guide. I mean, in like a pacing guide or scope and sequence. So although I want to be sure that the skills are mastered, I mean, I want to make sure that I expose everybody to the skill that I'm presenting. The mastery, I feel like it happens at different times, and that is when I can do the mastery part more in my small group instruction. So I just think that there are certain skills that I may not need, or some kids may not need a full week. And there are other skills, like here I pointed out the inflected endings. Yeah, I can introduce them and teach them in my small group, but then I also feel as though I can sort of integrate that skill throughout the rest of the weeks. I don't need to just set aside one full week of inflected endings for certain kids. Like I said, yes, I will expose them all, but the mastery comes at that targeted instruction, depending on what the skills are that the kids are using. And then for the sight words, I also kind of I regroup them, knowing now what I know about how they have follow certain phonics patterns. I thought that they could be introduced at the same time. Certain words like could and would, or be, me, and he. So that's what I did with that. I'm sorry, I'm going kind of fast. Um, and then this is a sample lesson plan that I use, and one that I do use this particular lesson plan whole group. And then I pretty much use the same thing, only targeting and modifying the actual skills that I'm doing at my teacher table, which is like I said, I like to say where the magic happens. And also too, I feel like it's super important to remember that the skills need to be applied. The application piece is huge. So even though I'm explicitly teaching the skills, we don't want to have them only practicing in isolation. We want to make sure that they're practicing in like some connected text or decodables as well. Let's see. And these are some tools that I use in the classroom for teaching small group. And I do some stuff whole group. I try to be super sensory and I try to make it fun. And this is just some takeaways that I put up. Oh, sorry. Informed teachers teach kids how to read, not programs. Educating yourself around evidence-based practices is the first step. It can feel super overwhelming and daunting. Start really small. Focus on one new piece of your practice and then refine it and add more as you get comfortable. There's no one perfect scope and sequence. Work with what you have. Be flexible, modify to support your learners and their needs. Teachers need to know their kids so that you'll be able to target that instruction. Phonological awareness is crucial in more than just rhyming. Phonics should be systematic and explicit with a goal of mastery, not just exposure. Give students time to practice skills, as well as skills previously learned, and application is key. The English language does make sense. Think of heart word magic. And replace a word wall. Replace your word wall with a sound wall. Buy little mirrors for your kids. Focus on sounds, mouth, tongue placement. And then these are just some additional resources that I've used in my class and, in my planning and instruction. And so that's it.
Lisa, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, that was great.
Do you want me to keep up my presentation or should I stop sharing?
If you could stop sharing for us,
Sure.
that would be very helpful.
So we can see everybody.
Yeah. No, you gave us so much to consider, Lisa. Thank you very much. I am going to go back to sharing my screen for a moment.
Okay.
And I also just want to remind people while I'm doing that everything that Lisa shared today was from two main sections of the guide. The skills for early reading section around phonological awareness and decoding, as well as the components of the core literacy block page. She specifically went into grade 1, and she also spent some time at the differentiated instruction page, and everything she referenced is on the link doc that was shared earlier with you today. So, because I know there was just a lot of really good information. Right now, we're going to have time for a few questions. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Susan Kazeroid. Susan's also a content lead here at DESE, and she was deeply involved in the development of the guide, and her and Lisa will talk about some questions that came up. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And Lisa, there was a comment in the chat thanking you for such a fantastic job. And I echo that. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, some of your experiences. You gave us so much to think about. I love your tips, your tip for starting small and focusing on one new piece of a practice, refine it, get comfortable with it before you move on to something else. I think that something for all of us to remember. So thank you for that. We do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Knowing that one of your tips was around teachers needing to know their students' individual needs when it comes to planning and instruction, which we all know is so key. Was wondering if you have any tips as to where to start.
So, as far as phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, I've used the Heggerty. I really like the Heggerty assessment. I've used that. But I do also know, see, in our district, we use Dibbles, which is really helpful to get sort of some baseline data. But there are some other sort of free assessments that you can get, because it really is sort of about assessing them, assessing the kids. The past is one assessment that you could use. That's a phonological, phonemic awareness assessment. You know, I really focus, I never realized how important, again, like I said, the phonemic awareness was, and even really like being so explicit with phonics, I would really start with the basics of like the letter recognition, the letter, you know, being automatic with the letter recognition and letter sounds. I mean, those are things that you can do without purchasing anything, you know, and then from there, go to sort of like, you know, can they blend? You know, can they hear sounds orally, the oral sounds, you know, for the phonological awareness. I don't
Thank
know.
you. No, that's great. Along that line, you talked about sound walls and the importance of sound walls. We had a question around sound walls. If you, now that you're back in a hybrid model and students are wearing masks, do you have any tips for interacting with the sound wall?
Yeah, I mean, we usually, because like I said, I was doing a lot virtually. Having the kids, you know, one of the pieces of the sound wall is like the vowel valley, going over and finding, you know, the sound, whatever it is that the vowel sound that we're working on. Like right now, we were working on with long A, using those pointers and going over, you know, reading off playing like certain different games and things. We've done stuff like that. I mean, like I said, we've only been back in school for a very short time. But it can definitely be interactive. Just it's honestly, it's almost the same thing as what you may have done with your word wall. It's only these words are sorted by sound. And my kids actually, if you see my slides or whatever, my vowel valley, my kids were the ones that said, "Hey, we could put B and he under E on the wall," you know, and I'm not really even sure if that's even how I should be displaying it with the words like that, but they wanted to do that and they made that connection, and so that's what we did.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I know also that clear masks are a great way too of being able to see. So Yes, thank you. And another question around your English language learner staff. Do you have a planning period or coordination time with any EL staff? And do you have any suggestions for that?
We don't really have any set planning time set aside, but we do. Our kids do see kids that are identified as SEI 1 or 2. They are pulled out for our writing block, and so the teacher will try to sort of coordinate a little bit with us as far as what we're doing for writing. I should mention too that I actually am in a co-taught classroom, and I mean, it's good for all the kids, but a lot of my sort of my special education training has been super helpful for my English learners as well. You know, it's just using a lot of the visuals anytime we do like vocabulary, um, anything that you can do hands-on. Like I said, we do a lot of the multisensory stuff, like drawing the making letters in sand, and utilizing, like I said, they're showing them their mouth movements with the mirrors, and any kind of visuals has been super helpful, I find.
Great, thank you. We have time, I think, for one more, and we've had a couple requests. If you could talk through your sample lesson plan again.
Oh, sure. So I do Haggerty every day, and so that's 10 minutes. I do that whole group, and then in my small group, well, actually, I could tell you my whole group is basically my small group is basically a replication of what I do whole group. So I do the only it's targeted. So we do Haggerty phonemic awareness. Then I do some review of whatever skill that we happen to have worked on. We do I do some sight word stuff with them, some heart word that could be like a review as well. Then I go into the target skill for the day, and like I said, I'm doing this for everybody because I want all of the kids to be exposed, even if they're not actually there yet. We do I do the target skill, whatever it is that we're working on. And then sometimes too, I will do some chaining exercises or and this is like, again, all whole group with whiteboards. And then I try to add some differentiation in there when we're in the whole group. So I might put some more difficult words to read in the chaining, some higher level words and sort of intentionally call on my higher level kids for that. And then we do a reading. We usually do, it depends on what it is. Like sometimes today I projected a reader up on the board that had the skill that we were working on. And we go through that whole group, just reading through it, the connected text, and that's it. And then I go into my small group. And like I said, in small group, it's pretty much the same thing, only it's just more targeted. So, depending on what the kids need, the kids who are still really struggling with like the phonemic awareness piece, I may do some, individual stuff with them first, really targeting that, and maybe spend more time on that depending on what it is that we're working on.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Lisa. I know we could spend all afternoon, but I'm going to turn it back over to Donna Goldstein.
Wow, that's awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Lisa, thank you very much again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
We really appreciate your time and everything you shared. I just really, before we close, I quickly want to ask you, have one reminder and a brief ask. Be sure to check out the top resources page that we mentioned at the beginning of this session. The link is in the doc that we shared with you. This is where all the videos that were previously recorded are posted, and where a recording of today's presentation and all presentations will be posted. Also, there's a link to this one pager that offers different ways to help you access the guide. Again, both of these links are included in the resource document that we shared. Your feedback makes our work stronger. If you could please take 2 to 3 minutes to complete this survey so we can try and be more responsive to you. The survey link was just put in the chat for you. We appreciate you being here again today, and thank you so much to Lisa. We hope you can join us next Thursday, March 4th at 3:30 p.m. for the session on engaging with complex text. If you have any further questions or comments, please submit them in the Mass Literacy Contact Us box, and that link is dropped in the chat for you as well, and it's also on the shared page. Thank you all, and this concludes our webinar. Thanks again, Lisa.
Thank you.